Grace Miller was pressing both hands against a stranger's bleeding chest when he opened his eyes and told her not to save him. Rain hammered the abandoned warehouse behind them. A black SUV had disappeared toward the Chicago River less than a minute earlier, leaving the man on the pavement with 2 bullets inside him and blood spreading beneath his expensive coat. "Do not call the police," he whispered. Grace tightened the folded scarf against the wound below his ribs. "You're in no condition to give instructions." His hand closed around her wrist with surprising strength. "They monitor emergency calls." "Who are they?" His eyes moved toward the empty road. "The men coming back to finish this." Headlights appeared at the far end of the street. Grace had 3 seconds to choose. She could leave the wounded stranger where she found him, drive away, and pretend she had never turned onto the industrial road. Or she could place herself between him and the people returning through the storm. The stranger's pulse weakened beneath her fingers. Grace swore under her breath. "My car is 20 feet away. Can you stand?" "No." That was not helpful. She hooked one of his arms around her shoulders and tried to lift him. He was tall, heavily built, and almost unconscious. His knees buckled immediately. The approaching headlights grew brighter. Grace dragged him instead. His shoes scraped across wet pavement. Blood followed them in a broken line toward her old Honda. "Stay awake," she said. "You should leave. I'm beginning to understand why someone shot you." For 1 second, the corner of his mouth moved. Then his head fell against her shoulder. Grace managed to open the rear door and push him across the seat. She climbed behind the wheel as the black SUV entered the road. The vehicle accelerated. Grace started the engine. Her tires spun uselessly on the wet pavement before catching. The SUV was less than 100 yards behind her. She turned sharply between 2 storage buildings, drove through an open loading yard, and forced the Honda beneath a half-lowered security barrier. Metal screamed across the roof. The SUV was too large to follow. Grace did not slow down. The man in the back seat groaned. "Hospital?" she asked. "No hospital. You have 2 gunshot wounds. They'll be waiting. You could die. That would solve several problems." Grace looked at him through the rearview mirror. His face was pale beneath streaks of rain and blood, but there was nothing ordinary about him. His dark wool coat had been tailored to fit him. A heavy watch remained on his wrist. Even half-conscious, he watched the road with the controlled attention of someone accustomed to danger. "Who are you?" He did not answer. Grace reached for her phone. He forced himself upright. "No emergency services." "I'm not asking permission. They trace the call, they find you. And if I do nothing, you bleed to death in my back seat." He stared at her. Grace thought he might try to take the phone. Instead he said, "Do you know a doctor who asks fewer questions?" She did. That fact had never seemed dangerous before. Dr. Nathan Hale had treated Grace's mother during the final years of her life. After retiring from trauma surgery, he opened a small private clinic near Pilsen and spent most of his time treating patients who could not afford larger hospitals. He would ask questions. He would simply help first. Grace called him. "Nathan, I'm bringing someone in." "It is 2 in the morning. He's been shot." Silence. Then Nathan's voice changed. "How long ago?" "Maybe 15 minutes. "Where?" "Shoulder and lower ribs." "Is he conscious?" "Barely." "Bring him through the garage. I'll open the surgery room." Grace ended the call. The stranger's eyes had closed. She reached into the back and slapped his knee. "Stay awake." He opened his eyes again. "Grace." She looked at her hospital badge hanging from the mirror. "You read my name. I notice things. Then notice that dying in my car will ruin the upholstery." His breathing almost became a laugh. "Lorenzo," he said. "What?" "My name." "Lorenzo what?" He closed his eyes. "That is enough for tonight." By the time Grace reached Nathan's clinic, Lorenzo had stopped responding. Nathan met her in the underground garage with a wheelchair and one frightened medical assistant. One look at the blood inside the Honda erased every complaint from his face. "What happened?" "I found him near the river." Nathan looked at Lorenzo's coat, watch, and the healed scar along one hand. "You found the wrong man. You know him." "No." Nathan cut away the shirt beneath the coat. But I know expensive trouble when I see it. The shoulder wound had passed through cleanly. The second bullet remained near Lorenzo's ribs. Nathan worked for almost 2 hours. Grace assisted because there was no one else. She held retractors, prepared medication, and monitored Lorenzo's blood pressure while Nathan removed the bullet. The projectile had stopped less than an inch from a major artery. "He should be dead," Nathan murmured. "He was too stubborn." "That is not a medical advantage." It was tonight. At 4:30, Lorenzo's condition stabilized. Nathan transferred him into a recovery room and locked the clinic doors. Grace washed blood from her hands. Her scrubs had been soaked through beneath her coat. Her hair clung to her neck. Every muscle in her body shook now that the crisis had passed. Nathan handed her a cup of coffee. "You need to tell me exactly where you found him." She did. Nathan's expression grew more concerned with every detail. "The people who shot him saw you." "One of them might have." "You need to call the police." He said emergency channels were monitored. "You trust him?" "No." "Then why are we hiding him?" "Because someone came back to kill him." Nathan looked through the glass at the unconscious man. "You saved a stranger based on one warning." "I saved him because he was bleeding." "That distinction may not matter to the people who shot him." Headlights appeared outside the clinic. Not one vehicle. 6 black sedans surrounded the building from both directions. Nathan slowly set down his coffee. "Those are not police cars." Grace moved toward the recovery room. "Lock the rear entrance." "You cannot fight 6 cars." "I'm not planning to." "What are you planning?" She opened a drawer and removed a surgical scalpel. Nathan stared at her. "That is your plan?" "It is all I have." The clinic's front door opened. Grace positioned herself in front of Lorenzo's bed. Footsteps moved through the hallway. Several men entered wearing dark coats over tailored suits. Each carried a concealed weapon badly enough that Grace could see the outlines beneath the fabric. The first man was in his 30s, broad-shouldered and dark-haired. A healing cut crossed his left eyebrow. His gaze moved from Grace to Lorenzo. "Step away from him." "No." The man's expression hardened. Grace raised the scalpel. "This clinic has cameras." "They're already disabled," Nathan whispered. That was not reassuring. 2 more armed men entered. Grace held her ground. "If you came to finish what happened at the warehouse, you will have to get through me." The first man stared at her. Then Lorenzo moved weakly on the bed. "Raphael." The armed man's entire posture changed. He lowered his head. Every man in the room did the same. "Boss." Grace looked at the patient she had pulled from the rain. Lorenzo opened his eyes. His voice was weak, but the command inside it was unmistakable. "No one touches her." The men nodded immediately. Nathan turned slowly toward Grace. "What exactly did you bring into my clinic?" The man called Raphael answered. "Lorenzo De Luca." The name meant nothing for half a second. Then Grace remembered newspaper photographs, business magazines, charity galas, and whispered stories from emergency room police officers. Lorenzo De Luca was chairman of De Luca Global. Hotels, shipping, construction, restaurants, private security. He was also rumored to control most of Chicago's organized crime from the lakefront to the southern suburbs. People called him the King of Chicago when they believed no one was listening. Grace looked down at the wounded stranger. "You're a mafia boss." Lorenzo's eyes held hers. "Not the introduction I would have chosen." Grace lowered the scalpel. "You could have mentioned it. You might not have saved me." "I'm reconsidering it." Raphael stepped closer. "Miss Miller, whoever attacked Mr. De Luca saw you leave the warehouse." Grace turned toward him. "How do you know my name?" "We ran the plate on your car." "You did what?" Lorenzo closed his eyes briefly. "Raphael." "She needs to understand." "I understand perfectly," Grace said. "You tracked me. We protected you. You learned my home address before learning whether I agreed to anything." Raphael looked at Lorenzo. Lorenzo opened his eyes again. "Is her apartment secure?" Raphael hesitated. "It was searched an hour ago." Grace stopped. "What?" "Door was forced. No one inside. Her younger brother sometimes stayed there between classes." "Ethan." She reached for her phone. Raphael caught her wrist. Grace turned on him. Take your hand off me. He did. She called Ethan. No answer. Again. Nothing. Lorenzo forced himself higher against the pillows. Find him. Raphael immediately made a call. Grace looked at Lorenzo. This happened because of you. Yes. The lack of denial made her angrier. You don't get to answer that calmly. I cannot change the answer. No, but you can stop acting like my life is now another problem on your schedule. Lorenzo studied her. Even pale and bandaged, he carried the kind of stillness that made everyone else in the room wait. Your brother will be found. And then, you and Dr. Hale will be moved somewhere secure. Grace laughed once. I'm not going anywhere with you. Gunfire shattered the clinic's front windows. Raphael pushed Grace to the floor. Nathan ducked behind a cabinet. The DeLuca men returned fire through the hallway. Grace crawled toward the recovery bed. Lorenzo tried to stand. She forced him back. You were shot 2 hours ago. I heard. Then behave like it. An attacker appeared at the end of the corridor. For a moment, lightning illuminated his face. Grace recognized him. He had stood near the black SUV at the warehouse. The man saw her. His expression changed. Then Raphael fired. The attacker disappeared behind the wall. The shooting stopped 3 minutes later. One DeLuca guard had been hit in the leg. Grace treated him while the others secured the building. The wounded attacker escaped. But now he knew Grace was alive. Lorenzo watched her bandage his guard. When she finished, he said, 48 hours. She looked at him. You stay under my protection for 48 hours, while we identify the shooter. You mean inside one of your locked houses? Yes. That sounds like imprisonment. It sounds like survival. To you, those might be the same thing. Raphael returned. We found Ethan. He was in a campus lab. He is safe. Grace's knees weakened with relief. Lorenzo noticed. He can be brought to you. No. He stays at school. That location may be compromised. Then send someone to watch him from a distance. Lorenzo's eyebrow lifted. You are giving instructions. I saved your life. Consider this my fee. Something almost like amusement passed through his eyes. 48 hours. Grace looked at the broken windows. At Nathan. At the blood on the floor. 48, she agreed. Then I leave. Lorenzo did not tell her that the decision was no longer entirely his. Someone had already returned to kill her. Until he knew who, 48 hours might become the rest of her life. The DeLuca estate stood on 30 acres north of the city behind stone walls, electronic gates, and enough armed security to defend a small government. Grace arrived in borrowed clothes because her apartment had been declared a crime scene by men who were not police officers. A woman waited in the entrance hall. She was tall, dark-haired, and dressed in a charcoal suit. Her face resembled Lorenzo's, though her expression contained less patience. Sophia DeLuca, she said. Lorenzo's sister and general counsel. Grace Miller. I know. Everyone seems to. Sophia looked toward Raphael. Has she been searched? Grace's exhaustion vanished beneath anger. No. Sophia did not react. You witnessed an attempt on my brother's life. I also prevented it from succeeding. That does not make you trustworthy. And being related to him does? Raphael looked away to hide a reaction. Sophia studied Grace for several seconds. Then she said, No, it does not. That answer changed the room. Grace allowed a female security officer to check her bag, but refused a physical search. Sophia accepted the boundary. Lorenzo was moved to a private medical suite on the second floor. Nathan remained with him until morning, then left under guard. Grace was shown to a guest room larger than her entire apartment. There were clothes in the closet, shoes in her size. A new phone waited on the desk. She picked it up. The device opened only to 6 approved contacts. Lorenzo, Sophia, Raphael, Nathan, Ethan, estate security. Grace walked directly to Lorenzo's room. He was awake, reading a report despite the intravenous line in his arm. She held up the phone. What is this? A secure device. It has 6 contacts. Those are the people you need. You don't decide who I need. Lorenzo closed the report. You were shot at 3 hours ago. And now I'm locked behind a gate with a phone designed by kidnappers. You agreed to remain. I agreed to protection, not control. Lorenzo's face remained calm. That calm infuriated her more than anger would have. What do you want? He asked. My own phone. Compromised. Internet access. Monitored. A key to the front gate. No. Grace folded her arms. This is a prison. It has better sheets. Do you joke with everyone you imprison? No. Lucky me. Lorenzo pushed the report aside. $1 million. Grace stared at him. For what? Saving my life. No. You have hospital debt. How do you know? My people investigated you. Stop saying invasive things as though they are normal. $238,000 in medical debt from your mother's treatment. Student loans. Your brother's tuition. Grace's face grew hot. Lorenzo continued. 1 million resolves all of it. I said no. 2 million. She moved closer to the bed. Do you think the problem is the number? Most problems involving money are. You are trying to turn gratitude into a transaction because paying me is easier than owing me something real. Lorenzo went still. Grace saw the words land. You saved me, he said. I repay debts. I didn't save you because you were rich. You did not know I was rich. I knew your watch cost more than my car. Then you made a poor investment. I made a medical decision. He looked at her for a long moment. What do I owe you then? The truth. His expression closed. Grace laughed without humor. That is what I thought. She turned toward the door. Grace. She stopped. The clothes were selected from photographs on your social media, he said. No one entered your home to choose them. She looked back. That was supposed to reassure me? No. For the first time, Lorenzo seemed uncertain how to speak to her. It was supposed to be the truth. Grace left before he could see that the attempt mattered. Ethan arrived the following afternoon. He walked into the estate carrying a backpack, wearing glasses and trying unsuccessfully to look unimpressed by the armed guards. Grace hugged him hard enough to make him complain. I'm fine. You ignored 6 calls. I was in the lab. Someone searched our apartment. I heard. Ethan looked past her toward the grand staircase. So this is where the Mafia lives? Grace lowered her voice. Do not call it that. A guard passing behind them said. We call it the North Estate. Ethan waited until the man left. That was not a denial. Lorenzo entered the hall wearing a black sweater beneath his shoulder bandage. He should not have been walking. Grace immediately noticed the faint strain around his mouth. You're supposed to be in bed. Ethan looked between them. You've known him for 1 day and already sound married. Grace glared at him. Lorenzo almost smiled. Ethan Miller. Ethan straightened. Mr. DeLuca. You use an online gambling platform called Ace Crown. The humor disappeared. Grace turned toward her brother. What? Ethan looked down. It's not important. You gamble. Sometimes. How much do you owe? He said nothing. Lorenzo answered. $412,000. Grace stared at Ethan. That isn't possible. The platform extended credit, Lorenzo said. Why were you investigating him? Because his debt is linked to the Bellucci organization. Ethan's face went pale. I didn't know. Grace stepped between them. My brother had nothing to do with the warehouse. I did not say he did. You implied it. I stated that people have betrayed family for less. Ethan looked terrified. Grace's anger sharpened. That says more about your family than mine. Lorenzo's gaze held hers. The hall became silent. Sophia entered carrying a file. Grace is right. Lorenzo turned. Sophia handed him the papers. The account was manipulated. Ethan's credit limit increased from $5,000 to $500,000 without request. Someone created the debt, Grace said. Sophia nodded. Possibly to use him later. Ethan sat heavily on a bench. I thought I could win it back. Grace closed her eyes. She had worked double shifts to pay his tuition. He had hidden a debt larger than everything they owned. I'm sorry, he whispered. Grace wanted to shout. Instead, she sat beside him. We deal with this after we survive the week. Lorenzo watched her. She was furious. She still placed one hand over her brother's. Family, in Grace's world, did not mean ignoring betrayal. It meant remaining present while demanding better. Lorenzo did not know anyone in his own family who understood that difference. Sophia opened another file. There is something else. She placed an old employment record on the table. The photograph showed Grace's mother, Laura Miller, 15 years younger. The employer listed beneath it was the DeLuca Community Relief Foundation. Grace stared at the document. My mother never told me she worked for your family. She was an accountant, Sophia said. She resigned 12 years ago. Grace looked at the date. 3 months before the car accident that killed her. Who supervised her? Sophia hesitated. Lorenzo read the name. Marco. Grace looked toward him. Who is Marco? My cousin, Lorenzo said. Chief Operating Officer of DeLuca Global. And where is he now? Running the company while I recover. The answer settled heavily over all of them. Grace spent the next week caring for the man she increasingly suspected might be connected to her mother's death. Lorenzo's recovery was slow because he refused to behave like a patient. He held meetings from bed. He reviewed shipping contracts at 2 in the morning. He removed his heart monitor twice because the wires interfered with his laptop. On the third attempt, Grace threatened to tape the device to his chest. You would not. I work in an emergency room. I have restrained men larger than you. Not twice as dangerous. Dangerous people still have blood pressure. Lorenzo allowed her to reconnect the leads. He watched her hands. Grace felt his attention but pretended not to. There was something unsettling about being observed by a man who made everyone else lower their voices. He noticed everything. The way she counted medication twice. The scar on her thumb from opening a can when she was 14. The fact that she ate standing up. You behave as though sitting down is a luxury, he said one night. Grace was reviewing his temperature while eating half a sandwich. I'm busy. You worked 16 hours before finding me. So, you sent most of your salary toward your brother's tuition. You investigated me again. Yes. Do you ever ask questions before stealing answers? People lie. Then maybe they lie because you make the truth feel dangerous. Lorenzo looked toward the dark windows. Your mother died when you were 17. Grace became still. He continued before she could object. You raised Ethan. I did what was necessary. You postponed graduate school. Also necessary. For how long? 3 years. Why? Because life happened. You speak as though exhaustion proves you are good. Grace put down the thermometer. You speak as though controlling everyone proves you care. They stared at each other. Lorenzo's voice lowered. I keep people alive. Sometimes. The word surprised him. Grace continued. And sometimes you make being alive feel like living under surveillance. Lorenzo leaned back. You have known me 1 week. I knew the type before I knew your name. Men like me. Men who mistake providing everything for listening to anything. Something in his face changed. Grace wondered who had accused him of that before. The answer came 2 nights later when Lorenzo woke from a nightmare. He shouted his brother's name. Grace entered to find him sitting upright, one hand reaching toward a gun that was not there. Lorenzo. He looked at her without recognition. She stayed near the door. You're at the estate. His breathing slowed. You were dreaming. I do not dream. Then your unconscious mind has an impressive imagination. He looked toward the window. Grace sat in the chair beside his bed. Who was Julian? My brother. What happened? Murdered outside a restaurant. I'm sorry. He trusted someone he should not have. Lorenzo's voice became colder. After that, I stopped allowing people I loved to remain unprotected. Did they ask for that protection? No. Did they stay? He looked at her. Not all of them. Grace understood. The control had not begun with her. She wondered how many people Lorenzo had held so tightly that leaving became their only freedom. I won't tell anyone about the nightmare, she said. I was not worried. You were. He almost denied it. Then stopped. Grace stood. At the door, Lorenzo said. Why were you near the river that night? My usual bridge was closed. There was no official closure. She turned. My navigation app redirected me. Lorenzo's expression hardened. Which app? Veil Route. A DeLuca-owned logistics platform. By morning, Sophia had confirmed the traffic notice was false. It had been generated using an executive access code. The software authorization had been approved by Marco DeLuca. Grace had not found Lorenzo by accident. Someone had sent her to the warehouse. The 48-hour agreement expired on the 7th day. Grace packed. Lorenzo stood in the guest room doorway. You are not leaving. We agreed. The shooter remains unidentified. My hospital has already replaced 3 shifts. You were shot at. So were you. Yet you keep attending meetings. That is different. Because you are the boss? Yes. Grace closed the suitcase. That answer is why I'm leaving. Lorenzo stepped into the room. If you leave this estate, you will have security. Chosen by me. Approved by me. No. His jaw tightened. Grace lifted the suitcase. You can either let me walk out with guards I select, or explain to your entire household why the woman who saved you is being held against her will. Lorenzo stared at her. Most people responded to his silence by surrendering. Grace waited. Raphael takes you, he said finally. 2 additional officers. 1. 2. 1 and I control the tracker. You negotiate like a criminal. I learned from the week's worst example. Lorenzo almost smiled. They walked toward the front entrance. Grace reached the first vehicle. The shot came from beyond the southern wall. Lorenzo heard the rifle half a second before impact. He threw Grace to the ground. The bullet shattered the window behind them. Security men opened fire toward the trees. Lorenzo covered Grace with his body. She felt him flinch. Are you hit? No. Blood appeared along his side where the healing wound had reopened. You're bleeding. Not from the bullet. Raphael pulled them toward the security bunker. Lorenzo kept one arm around Grace until the steel door closed. Inside, alarms flashed red across the walls. Grace forced him onto a bench. Lift your shirt. This is not the time. You tore the wound. I am aware. She removed the emergency kit from the wall. Lorenzo watched her hands shake while she cut away the bandage. You were frightened. A sniper fired at my head. For me. That does not improve it. Grace cleaned the wound. Lorenzo's breath tightened. You cannot leave. Her hands stopped. He continued. I cannot watch you walk into danger. Grace looked up. You do not get to keep me simply because losing me frightens you. The air between them changed. Lorenzo's face was inches from hers. The bunker suddenly seemed smaller. Grace could feel the heat of his body, smell clean soap beneath the faint metallic scent of blood, and see the restraint in the way his hands remained flat against the bench. He leaned closer. Grace did not move away immediately. For one reckless second, she wanted to know what it would feel like to be kissed by a man who controlled every room but seemed uncertain with her. Then she placed one hand against his chest. No. Lorenzo stopped. Grace felt his heart beating hard beneath her palm. I won't become involved with a man who refuses to tell me the truth. His eyes darkened. What truth? Your business. My mother. Why I was sent to the warehouse. What you intend to do when you find the shooter. Lorenzo slowly moved back. The fact that he stopped mattered more than Grace wanted it to. I will investigate your mother, he said. And the rest. You do not want every answer. Do not decide that for me. The bunker door opened. Sophia entered with a recovered bullet sealed inside a plastic bag. The rifle was registered to one of our security officers. Lorenzo's expression changed. The enemy was not outside the walls. He was already inside the house. Sophia gave Grace access to the internal investigation because Grace had seen the warehouse assassin's face. Lorenzo objected. Grace ignored him. Security logs showed that footage from the warehouse had been deleted using Sophia's executive credentials. Marco presented the finding during a family meeting. He arrived at the estate wearing a navy suit and the expression of a loyal cousin carrying terrible news. Grace disliked him immediately, not because he seemed dangerous, because he seemed too comfortable around everyone else's fear. Sophia's access code was used at 11:03 p.m., Marco said. Sophia folded her arms. I was at a legal dinner with 60 witnesses. Codes can be shared. Mine was not. Lorenzo looked toward his sister. For a second, Grace saw suspicion enter his face. Marco noticed too. The evidence should be handled privately, he said. For the family. Grace examined the printed access log. Something bothered her. The dates were written month, day, year. Every legal file Sophia had shown Grace used day, month, year because her department worked primarily with European subsidiaries. Grace pointed toward the page. This is fake. Marco looked at her. You are a nurse. And whoever created this copied Sophia's name but not her department settings. Sophia took the page. Her eyes sharpened. The audit software automatically uses European format under my profile. Marco's expression barely changed. Then someone altered the export. Someone created it from another account, Grace said. Lorenzo looked at Marco. Who prepared this report? Security Analytics. Name. I will obtain it. Now. Marco's smile disappeared. The analyst named in the report had left the city that morning. His apartment was empty. His accounts contained a recent payment from a shell company linked to DeLuca Shipping, a division controlled by Marco. Lorenzo wanted him brought in by force. Grace stopped him outside the meeting room. If Marco knows you suspect him, he destroys the evidence. He may have killed your mother. That is exactly why I want proof. You want justice. Yes. My world does not respect justice. Then teach it another language. Lorenzo looked at her. No one had ever asked him to change the rules of the world he inherited. They asked him to use those rules in their favor. Grace asked him to become someone capable of refusing them. Before he could answer, her secure phone rang. Ethan appeared on the screen. He was tied to a chair. A masked man stood behind him. Bring the black drive from Lorenzo DeLuca's private safe, the man said. Come alone or your brother dies. The video ended. Grace turned toward Lorenzo. Where is the drive? He said nothing. Lorenzo. It contains shipping records. Then give it to me. No. Grace stared at him. My brother. Walking into their exchange gives them both of you. I am not asking you to let me walk in unprotected. You are not going. She stepped closer. You do not get to decide this. I do when the alternative is your death. Grace left the hall. Lorenzo found her 30 minutes later in his office opening the wall safe. She had watched him enter the code days earlier. He caught her wrist. For one terrible second, both of them froze. Lorenzo looked at the open safe. At Grace's hand near the black drive. Were you going to steal from me? My brother is tied to a chair. You should have trusted me. She laughed bitterly. You refused before I finished asking. Lorenzo released her. Grace showed him the video. He watched Ethan's face. Then the room behind him. Old meatpacking district, he said. How? Cooling pipes. Red tile. There are 3 possible buildings. Grace picked up the drive. Lorenzo took it from her. We make a copy. You're letting me come? No. She stared at him. He closed his eyes briefly, then corrected himself. You help plan. You remain in the control vehicle. That is not enough. It is the compromise. Grace saw the effort the word required. She agreed. The exchange took place in an abandoned processing plant. The kidnappers wore Bellucci colors. Grace recognized the warehouse shooter among them. The plan collapsed when one attacker discovered the drive was incomplete. Gunfire began. Grace left the control vehicle. Lorenzo swore when he saw her cross the loading bay. She reached Ethan first and cut his restraints. The warehouse shooter aimed at her. Lorenzo shot the weapon from his hand. The man escaped through a side corridor. Another attacker died from his wounds. Before losing consciousness, he looked at Lorenzo and whispered, Bellucci didn't order this. Ethan was safe. On the drive back to the estate, he confessed everything. Ace Crown had offered him credit he never requested. The system automatically increased his limit. When he tried to close the account, someone threatened to expose the debt to Grace. The platform's payment processor belonged to Lakeshore Freight, a DeLuca subsidiary managed directly by Marco. Grace sat beside Ethan while Lorenzo watched from across the vehicle. Marco had used her brother, her mother, the false traffic alert, the assassin. Every path led toward him. Lorenzo said, "I will handle Marco." Grace looked at him. "Not without me." He almost refused. Then he remembered the safe. The choice she had nearly made because he excluded her. "Together," he said. It was the first promise they made as equals. Dominic Bellucci agreed to a secret meeting at a closed restaurant near Lake Michigan. He arrived with 3 guards and the relaxed smile of a man who enjoyed being underestimated. Grace sat beside Lorenzo. Dominic noticed. "The nurse." "The witness," Grace corrected. Dominic smiled wider. "I understand why he likes you." Lorenzo's expression cooled. Grace touched his arm beneath the table. Not affection. A warning. He remained silent. Dominic denied ordering the assassination. Then he placed photographs across the table. DeLuca shipping containers. Weapons hidden beneath legitimate cargo. Bellucci identification numbers painted on the crates. "Someone is using my name to start a war," Dominic said. "Marco?" Lorenzo asked. "I suspected him before your car exploded. Why not tell me? You would assume manipulation." "That was reasonable." Dominic shrugged. "Then we would already be shooting at one another." Grace placed her mother's photograph on the table. "Did you know her?" Dominic's amusement disappeared. "Laura Miller." Grace's pulse quickened. "She contacted me 12 years ago. She found money moving through DeLuca charity accounts into shipping companies both families used." "What happened?" "She wanted proof before going to federal authorities." "She died in a car accident." Dominic looked at Lorenzo. "No. She was killed." Grace's chest tightened. Lorenzo reached toward her hand, then stopped before touching. Grace noticed. Dominic removed a brass key. "Your mother rented a storage locker under another name." He slid the key across the table. "I did not know where her daughter was. Marco did." Grace took the key. Inside the storage locker were ledgers, photographs, and an old digital recorder. Laura's voice described the laundering network. Then Marco's voice entered the recording. "The accountant has become a problem." Another man asked, "And the daughter?" "Remove both. No loose ends." Grace stopped the recording. Her hands went numb. She had been 17 when her mother died. She had been supposed to travel with her that day. Laura changed the plan at the last minute and left Grace with Nathan. Her mother had known. She went alone to save her daughter. Lorenzo stood beside Grace in the dim storage unit. "I will make him answer for this." Grace looked at him. "In court." "Grace. No disappearance. No body in the river. No private revenge. He ordered your death. And killing him secretly lets every official he bought survive." Lorenzo looked at Laura's records. For most of his life, revenge had been the proof that a victim mattered. Grace was asking for something harder. Exposure. Consequences that could not be hidden. "I agree," he said. Grace searched his face. "You mean it?" "Yes." Lorenzo's phone rang. Marco had called an emergency council meeting. He intended to remove Lorenzo from leadership. The DeLuca Council met inside the ballroom of the family's downtown hotel. 30 senior captains, attorneys, executives, and representatives from allied organizations filled the room. Marco stood at the center. "Lorenzo has allowed an outsider to compromise family security." Grace heard the accusation from the corridor. Lorenzo wanted her moved to a safe floor. She refused. Marco displayed photographs of Grace meeting Dominic Bellucci. She saved Lorenzo because Bellucci directed her toward the warehouse. "That is a lie," Sophia said. Marco looked toward the captains. "Her mother investigated our family. Her brother owes money to our enemies." She entered Lorenzo's private safe. Now she meets Bellucci in secret. Several men began speaking at once. Lorenzo stood. The room quieted. "Grace Miller saved my life." Marco nodded. "And since then you have ignored evidence, exposed internal operations, and placed her above blood." Lorenzo's expression hardened. "Blood tried to kill me." Marco smiled sadly, as though grieving his cousin's decline. "She has made you paranoid." The ballroom doors opened. Grace entered carrying Laura's evidence box. Every armed man turned toward her. Lorenzo's first instinct was to order her removed. He controlled it. Grace walked to the center of the room. "You want to know why I was sent to the warehouse?" No one answered. She placed the false traffic authorization on the screen. "An executive code redirected my car. Then Ethan's gambling records. A DeLuca subsidiary created debt in my brother's name. Then Laura's ledgers. My mother discovered money laundering through your charity and shipping companies." Marco folded his arms. "Documents can be fabricated." Grace played the recording. His own voice filled the ballroom. "The accountant has become a problem. And the daughter? Remove both." The room changed. Marco's face did not. "Edited audio. It will be authenticated," Grace said. Marco displayed another image. Grace embracing Dominic after the storage meeting. "She works for Bellucci." Captains reached for weapons. Lorenzo looked at Grace. He did not have complete proof. He had years of loyalty from Marco and weeks of truth from Grace. The old Lorenzo would have tested her again. Demanded access. Confined her until he felt certain. Instead, he stepped beside her. Not in front. Beside. "I believe her." Marco's eyes hardened. "You choose an outsider over family. I choose the person who told me the truth." Marco nodded toward the guards. "Arrest them." Half the security team moved. The other half did not. Gunfire shattered the ballroom windows. Lorenzo pulled Grace behind a marble column. Sophia fired toward the compromised guards. Raphael opened a service door. "This way." They moved through a kitchen corridor toward an underground tunnel. Grace heard someone behind them. She turned. A guard raised his weapon at Lorenzo's back. Grace moved before thinking. The bullet struck beneath her shoulder. The force spun her into Lorenzo. For a second she felt no pain. Only surprise. Then heat spread across her chest. Lorenzo caught her. "Grace." She looked down at the blood. "That seems bad." His face changed into something she had never seen. Not anger. Terror without armor. He lifted her into his arms. The tunnel blurred above her. "Stay with me." "You said that in my car." "I mean it." "You meant it then too." Her eyes closed. Lorenzo shouted her name. He carried Grace into Nathan's clinic through the same garage where she had brought him weeks earlier. This time her blood covered his clothes. Nathan saw them and swore. Operating room. Lorenzo followed. Nathan blocked him. "You cannot come inside." "I am not leaving." "You will interfere." "I will stand back." "You threatened my staff the last time you were afraid." Lorenzo looked at Grace's pale face. "I won't." Nathan hesitated, then allowed him to remain near the wall. The bullet had passed through Grace's upper chest without striking her heart. Bone fragments damaged a small artery. Nathan worked for 3 hours. Lorenzo stood with Grace's blood drying on his hands. At one point the monitor alarm changed. He stepped forward. A nurse flinched. Sophia caught his arm. "Stop. They are losing her. They are saving her. I need." "No." Sophia looked at her brother. "Fear does not give you permission to terrorize the people keeping her alive." The sentence belonged to Grace. Lorenzo heard it in his sister's voice. He stepped back. The surgeon stabilized her. Grace woke the following morning. Lorenzo sat beside the bed. His suit had been replaced with a dark sweater, but dried blood remained beneath one fingernail. "You stayed." "Yes." "You look terrible." "So do you." That was almost human. His face broke into a brief, exhausted smile. Then he lowered his head. "I brought this into your life." "Marco brought it. I kept you near me. You tried to keep me everywhere." "I am sorry." Grace studied him. Lorenzo De Luca apologized as though the words had sharp edges. "I love you," he said. Grace stopped breathing. He did not move closer. "I do not know when it began. Maybe in the car when you insulted me while I was dying. Maybe when you refused my money. Maybe before I understood that every time you challenged me, you were asking me to become someone who deserved to survive." Grace's eyes filled. She wanted to say it back. Instead, she asked, "Does loving me mean you will respect my choices?" "Yes." "What if the choice is not the one you want?" He hesitated. Grace waited. Lorenzo looked at her bandaged chest. Then I learn what love costs. That is not the same as respect. No. He corrected himself. I respect it anyway. Grace reached for his hand. Not forgiveness. Not surrender. A beginning. Marco took control of DeLuca headquarters while Grace recovered. He announced that Lorenzo had become emotionally compromised. He placed a bounty on Grace. Then he contacted a foreign syndicate and offered to deliver her in exchange for recognition as the new head of the family. Lorenzo wanted her moved out of the country. Grace refused. You promised. I promised to respect choices, not celebrate suicidal ones. I have the complete evidence. That is why they want you. And why I need to be present when we release it. Lorenzo looked toward the hospital window. A charity gala would take place in 3 days. Politicians, business leaders, captains, and rival representatives would attend. Marco intended to use the event to establish himself publicly. Grace planned to walk into it. Lorenzo hated the plan. He agreed. The gala filled the Grand DeLuca Hotel with diamonds, black suits, television cameras, and enough hidden weapons to start a war. Grace wore a deep green dress designed to conceal the healing bandage beneath her shoulder. Sophia remained beside her. Lorenzo arrived separately. Marco stood near the stage greeting guests as though the empire already belonged to him. When Grace entered the ballroom, conversations stopped. Marco lifted one hand. There she is. The woman who turned Lorenzo DeLuca against his own blood. Several armed men moved toward Grace. Lorenzo stepped between them. Marco smiled. You have one final choice. The family or her. Lorenzo looked at Grace. Do you trust me? Enough to stand here. His eyes held hers. Not enough to be owned, she added. He understood. Lorenzo lifted one hand but did not touch her. May I? The room watched. Grace gave a small nod. Lorenzo placed one hand against her waist and kissed her. The kiss was deliberate, brief, and nothing like possession. It was a declaration made before men who understood only power. When he stepped back, Grace remained beside him by choice. Lorenzo faced the room. Grace Miller is under my protection because she saved my life, exposed the traitor among us, and took a bullet meant for me. Marco's mouth tightened. Lorenzo continued. Anyone who harms her is not challenging my property. His gaze moved across every captain. They are declaring war on my future. Grace took his hand. Several captains lowered their weapons. Marco laughed. Beautiful. He signaled toward the stage. A recording began playing through the ballroom speakers. Lorenzo's voice filled the room. Laura Miller has become a problem. Remove her before this reaches the board. Grace's hand slipped from his. The words continued. Do whatever is necessary. The ballroom turned toward Lorenzo. Grace stared at him. Is that your voice? Yes. Did you order my mother removed? Not killed. Marco smiled. Of course not. Grace stepped away. Pain crossed Lorenzo's face. He did not stop her. Sophia escorted Grace out while Marco announced that Lorenzo had manipulated the daughter of a woman he murdered. The public kiss that had reclaimed Lorenzo's authority now threatened to destroy it. Grace refused to believe either man without proof. A digital audio expert examined the recording. The sentence had been assembled from 3 conversations. The first concerned removing Laura from an audit because threats had been made against her. The second concerned taking the evidence to the board. The phrase "do whatever is necessary" came from a security discussion months later. Grace found the original recordings inside Laura's storage archive. Lorenzo had ordered Marco to place Laura under protection. Marco altered the instruction, then arranged the car accident. But another truth remained. Lorenzo knew illegal accounts existed. He chose private reform instead of public exposure. His silence protected the organization that killed her. Grace confronted him inside Nathan's clinic. You did not murder my mother. No. But you knew what she found. Some of it. You protected the family name. Yes. Instead of her. Lorenzo lowered his head. I believed I could fix the system without destroying everyone inside it. And she died. Yes. Grace's voice broke. You protected the world that killed her. Lorenzo looked at her. No defense. No explanation disguised as remorse. Yes. The word hurt more because it was honest. What will you do? Release everything. You could lose the company. Yes. You could go to prison. Yes. Why? Because keeping you cannot be the reason. Grace stared at him. Lorenzo continued. If I expose Marco only to make you stay, I have learned nothing. I am doing it because your mother deserved the truth when she was alive. And the people still trapped inside my family deserve it now. Grace did not forgive him. She believed him. That was enough for the next step. Marco kidnapped Ethan and Sophia before the evidence could be delivered. The message directed Lorenzo and Grace back to the abandoned warehouse beside the river, where everything began. The storm returned on the night of the final confrontation. Rain struck the warehouse roof. Ethan and Sophia were restrained inside the old medical storage level. Marco stood above them with a detonator. Lorenzo wanted Grace to remain with the tactical team. She pointed toward the building plans. The lower service tunnel opens near the storage level. I saw it the night I found you. You were outside. I was looking for medical supplies after Nathan stabilized you. There was an old clinic entrance in the warehouse. This is too dangerous. So was pulling you into my car. Lorenzo closed his eyes. The choice was everything he feared. He opened them. You take Raphael. 1 guard. 2. Grace almost smiled. 2. They entered separately. Lorenzo approached through the main loading floor. Grace used the medical tunnel. She reached Ethan and Sophia while Marco confronted Lorenzo above. You still think she found you by accident? Marco asked. Lorenzo's expression did not change. I sent her. Grace stopped beneath the metal stairs. Marco continued. I knew who Laura's daughter was. I knew her hospital schedule. I created the traffic closure. Why? If you died, the investigation would lead to a witness connected to an old family scandal. Grace would be blamed or killed. And if I survived? She became leverage. Grace stepped into view. You arranged where we met. Marco smiled. Yes. You did not decide what we became. His smile vanished. Grace cut Ethan's restraints. Marco activated the explosives. Alarms screamed through the warehouse. He ran toward the river exit. Lorenzo could follow him. Instead, he moved toward the hostages. Together, they evacuated the workers Marco had locked inside the adjoining storage area. Gas leaked from damaged medical tanks. Grace found the shutoff valve. Sophia moved people through the tunnel. Marco reached the river. Dominic Bellucci's men blocked his boat. Federal agents surrounded the dock. Marco was arrested alive. Lorenzo kept his promise. He did not have him killed. The evidence reached federal prosecutors the following morning. Lorenzo surrendered everything. Laura's ledgers, weapons manifests, illegal gambling records, political bribes, smuggling routes, payments to corrupt officers, his own historical crimes. His attorneys advised him to blame Marco. Lorenzo refused. Accepting consequences does not make you innocent, Grace told him before the hearing. I know. You may lose everything. I already learned what everything means. A legal agreement preserved DeLuca Global's legitimate businesses. Hotels remained open. Restaurants kept their employees. Construction projects continued. Pensions were protected. Criminal assets were seized. Independent directors took control. Sophia became temporary chairwoman. Marco was convicted of attempted murder, kidnapping, weapons trafficking, conspiracy, and Laura Miller's death. Lorenzo received a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. He sold his private properties to fund compensation for families harmed by DeLuca operations. Grace created the Laura Miller Fund for whistleblowers and victims. She returned to the hospital. She and Lorenzo lived apart. He did not ask her to wait. He did not use money to keep her close. He wrote letters. Not declarations. Truths. He told her about Julian, his father, the first man he ordered hurt. The first time he understood power could silence guilt without removing it. Grace answered only when she wanted. 1 year after the night she saved him, Lorenzo asked her to meet beside the river. The warehouse had been demolished. In its place stood the Laura Miller Emergency Medical Center. The building would provide free trauma treatment, legal support, and protected care for witnesses escaping organized crime. Rain began falling as Grace arrived. Lorenzo waited outside without guards. He looked different. Not weaker. Quieter. He held something in one hand. Her old hospital badge. The one she wore the night she found him. It was recovered during the warehouse demolition, he said. Grace took it. The plastic was scratched, but her photograph remained visible. You saved my life before you knew my name, Lorenzo said. I spent months believing that gave me the right to keep you. Grace looked at him. It did not. No. What do you want now? A chance to stand beside you for as long as you choose me. No council watched. No armed men waited. No public declaration forced her answer. Grace stepped closer. She kissed him first. Months later at the medical center's opening ceremony, a reporter asked whether Grace was the woman Lorenzo DeLuca had publicly claimed. Grace looked toward Lorenzo. He did not claim me. The reporter hesitated. Grace smiled. He chose me in public. She slipped her hand into Lorenzo's. I chose him later in private. That night, an ambulance arrived during another storm. Paramedics brought in an injured stranger. Grace immediately took control of the emergency team. Lorenzo stood near the wall. Once, he would have cleared the room, demanded information, and placed guards beside every door. Now he allowed Grace to lead. She had saved him from bleeding to death beside a warehouse. But her greater rescue came later. She saved him from a life in which power had replaced trust, fear had replaced family, and protection had become another form of captivity. He had once kissed her before everyone and declared that no one could touch her without facing him. Years later, he understood the real promise was simpler. He would never again become the person she needed protection from. Grace looked up from the patient. Their eyes met. Lorenzo smiled. She had found him dying in the rain as a stranger. She chose him only after he learned how to live as a man.